We'll just get started. So hello everyone watching, and hello to Chris as well. I'm really excited to be hosting this Q&A with Chris Whitaker today. So Chris, there's lots of members at Chapter 25 here that they're here, but we can't see them, and they're just watching us, which is really lovely. I just want to give a little introduction as to who I am in case there's those out there who don't know who I am. So my name is Charlotte and I am the host for Volume 1 of Chapter 25 in Plymouth. And I also host Virtual Volume 6 and a lot of the bonus chapter events such as Crime and Thriller and all of that. And it's really lovely to be here today hosting this Q&A with Chris Whitaker. For those of those members that know me, know that I am a big fan of Chris's work, and I have been recommending All the Colours of the Dark to everyone. It's one of those books that you just have to read. So I'm super excited for today's event. For the members, if you want to ask Chris a question, please feel free to either pop it in the Discord chat or in the Q&A function here, and I'll get around as many of them as possible, and I'm sure Chris won't mind answering the questions.
Of course.
Amazing, thank you so much. So Chris, could I just ask you, would you be okay to just introduce yourself to the members?
Yes, I am Chris Whitaker, and I'm guessing you have just read my fourth book, All the Colours of the Dark. My first book was Tall Oaks, and that came out, God, like 10 years ago. I think it was 2017, maybe 2015, something like that. And I write a book every like 3 or 4 years at the moment. The book before All the Colours of the Dark was We Begin at the End. They were both my kind of breakout books. The first books did well critically. They reviewed it really well, but they didn't sell that well. And then We Begin at the End was a New York Times bestseller, and then All the Colours of the Dark again. So the pressure just keeps mounting with every book.
I can imagine. How does that pressure feel for you, that now that you've had some, best-selling books? Does it feel like you get more pressure with each book that you write?
Do you know what? It doesn't. I think it probably does for the team that work with me. Like I have a big UK US team, and obviously we all want the book to be successful. But success looks like different things. I think probably publishers want it to be a bestseller and on the best bestseller charts, and I just want to reach readers, and I don't really care if they buy the book or they get it from the library or they lend copies. You just really want people to connect with the story, and so the more people you reach, the better the chances of that happening. But I've been on tour forever, like a year and a half on tour. I worked out the other day that I'd done over 100 cities, which is crazy. And I've only been back in the UK for properly since I moved into the house a month ago. So it all finished in November, and so I'm just being really selective this year about where I travel to and trying to get some routine going again, because it got to be really hard because I was never at home, and it was hard for my kids. I didn't have any time to write, and I have a deadline, and yeah. It just tipped over, I think, into too much PR, not enough writing.
Yeah, I completely understand that. Yeah, I kept seeing all your tour dates everywhere. I was like, my goodness, this man is busy.
Yeah, in my head, it was easier to tour than it was to write another book. So I kept it going. No, I did. It was amazing. I got to travel the world, and it's just it's not work at all. It's the stuff of dreams. It really is.
Oh, amazing. Did you get to meet lots of readers that had read your books and give you feedback on how they found the books?
So many. Yeah, I've just lost count, and people bring gifts and send letters and make artwork of the book and the characters, and yeah, people are overwhelmingly kind and nice. That's what I found. But then I always think that readers are generally nicer people. So if I go into a bookshop, I always think that everyone in here is lovely, is like my people. So, and the same in a library. I just think it works like that, doesn't it? If you're well read, you're better able to empathize, I think.
Absolutely.
Because you spend a lot of your time in someone else's head.
Yeah, completely agree. since joining chapter 25, which I did back in 2024, I've just met so many lovely people. And
Mhm.
it's just that reading community. It just, yeah, brings everyone together. And I've just made friends for life through the book club. So I
So
completely get what you mean there.
what is the book club? How did it begin? Is it like an online thing, or do you meet in person? Or
We do lots of very different things basically. So our lovely founder Sian, she started up the book club in Malden, and it's basically just expanded from there. She just wanted to create a community for readers all over the UK, but who knows, how much more that will expand. So we have over 200 clubs just in the UK.
and you try
They
and
do in
read the same
person.
book? Or
Not all of us, so it depends on what book club you're a part of, because we
okay.
want it to be to the taste of those readers in that club. So we
Mhm.
do like a genre survey every couple of months to see what those readers want to read, and then it's kind of based off of that.
Yeah,
And then we also have virtual book clubs as well as our bonus chapter events, which is lots of author Q&As and like specific genre events. So it's turned into a massive community, which is just absolutely amazing.
that is really amazing.
Yeah. And it's lovely to have you a part of it now on our Q&A. So thank you so much. So a lot of our members have read All of the Colours of the Dark and have just had absolutely rave reviews about it. And as I said, I've just been recommending it to everyone since I read it. I think it was about July last year that I read it. I've just been recommending it to absolutely everybody. And I wanted to ask, like, was there any sort of was there something that kind of inspired you to first write the book? Was there any sort of um, specific inspiration that you had to write All the Colours of the Dark, and how did it evolve from that initial concept?
Think that I remember having the idea for the two abducted teenagers falling in love in this pitch black basement, and I like the idea of these two people getting to know each other without anything going on around them. We're so visual now, aren't we? Like we've never been more kind of assaulted by everything that we see. Like my kids are obsessed with TikTok, and I worry about it because like I see them scrolling, and if they're not entertained within 5 seconds, they scroll. And everyone, they're looking for this instant gratification, and it's very visual. Hold my attention, keep me interested. And I wanted to strip everything away, and I knew that I wanted to kind of write a love story, but to bury it in a missing person mystery. So I had the idea, two abducted teenagers, they fall in love in this pitch black basement, having never seen each other, and then I knew the boy would escape, and then have this huge problem because he's kind of fallen in love with this girl and doesn't know anything about her, doesn't know her real name, doesn't necessarily know her real name, doesn't know what she looks like, can't give the police any specific details. And so quickly people don't believe that she's real. So I knew he had this problem, but I wanted the bond that they form, when they're in this terrible situation. I wanted it to be so strong that it alters the course of his life, and it in turn alters the course of Saint's life, his best friend. And so this, I was really interested in the sliding doors moments that we have in our lives. When you walk into a bar and you meet the person you're supposed to be with, and you could have not gone into the bar. You could have gone somewhere else that night, and you would be living a different life. And I find it fascinating. My life is made up of 100 of those instances. And I can trace everything that's happened to me, good and bad, that has led me exactly here now talking to your book club. And it sounds a bit mad, but I know that if I were to pull one thread, everything else unravels. So I wanted to look at that. I wanted these two characters to have this bond, but that bond comes about because of something terrible. Patch is walking to school, hears a girl scream, hears Misty scream, steps in, she gets away, he gets taken. They kind of switch roles at that point. And then We Begin at the End came out when I was writing All the Colours of the Dark, and everyone kept messaging me at the end of it saying, what happens to Duchess? if you haven't read the book, Duchess is a 13-year-old girl, and we begin at the end, follows a year in her life. And so we meet her at 13, leave her at 14, and everyone wanted to know what next. You know, is she going to be okay? And I didn't know the answer to that question. You know, I didn't know what happens to kids like Patch, like Duchess, what happens to them as adults, because they've had this terrible start in life. And I knew that I wanted to answer it, and to answer it meant that I would all of a sudden be writing someone's life story. And so what started out as a missing person mystery quickly turned into a bigger book. You know, All the Colours of the Dark became this massive story, you know, this huge coming of age story, a story about first love and family and friendship, and kind of, it has a mystery in it, and it's slightly about the police side of it, but more so than that, it's about sliding doors moments in our lives. And I knew that I would need to follow Patch and Saint from 13 into adulthood, but I also knew that would mess with the rhythm of a crime story. You know, it would definitely not follow the tropes that we're used to reading. You know, the pace would tail off at some points and then accelerate again, and like it does in real life. You know, my favorite time in my life is when nothing much is going on, you know, and things are settled and you're kind of waiting for the next thing. But you're, you know, I'm having one of those years this year because I don't have a book out this year, and I've been looking forward to it. Because like the hardback came out in 24, last year I was on the paperback tour, and then this year is kind of a fallow year where I get some writing done and we begin teeing up the next book and thinking about publication. But I like it because I get to be a dad, and you know, and calm down, live a calmer life. And then they were my favorite parts to write of All the Colours of the Dark, when Patch is home and you get a glimpse of the life that this boy should have had. You know, and he's home and he's trying to put down roots, and it's kind of bittersweet because you're reading it and the pace has dropped, but you know what's coming. You know that, you know, at the drop of the hat he's going to race off and follow some wild lead and get himself into loads of trouble. But for the moment, you know, he gets to be the person that he should be and live the life that he should live.
Yeah, absolutely. That's all so interesting. Thank you so much. You talked a bit about how it's that there's a love story within it, but also how it does kind of have those crime thriller kind of aspects to it. One thing that really like draws me to read the book in the first place is because I'm a big crime and thriller reader. But there's so many other aspects to it, like you mentioned, with the whole like a bit with the police, and it also follows a bit of like a literary fiction side as well. Is there like, would you define it in a specific genre, or do you think it's an amalgamation of them? What are your sort of thoughts on that?
It's a difficult one because, so whenever I meet someone and they say, what do you do for a living? And I say, I'm an author, and they say, what kind of books do you write? I really struggle to answer it. And I always say kind of crime, which, and that then they look slightly confused. But I think they are kind of, All the Colours of the Dark has a crime in it. It's the least interesting thing in the book, the crime, in my opinion. You know, it's the bit that it takes up a very short part of the story, you know, the basement scenes. And I remember finishing it, and then we really struggled with the title, the cover, the copy that goes on the back of it, which authors to get to blurb it, you know, whose blurbs to choose for the front cover. Do you want it to look like a crime book? Do you want Richard Osman on the cover? Do you want Gillian Flynn? You know, because then it kind of suggests crime book, but then you can have Bonnie Garmus, you know, and kind of pull it back slightly. There's so much science behind publishing a bestseller. I'm glad that I don't have to make those decisions, because I remember looking at the cover the first time in the UK, and I remember saying to them, you pitched it wrong, you know, it's too crime. You know, the white cover looks kind of cold and kind of like a destination thriller, and it took me a long time to kind of fall in love with it. And I do truly love it, and I love the US cover as well. And, you know, some of the covers from the book around the world are really beautiful. And it's interesting because they publish it in different ways in different countries. Like in France, it is very literary and looks very different. You know, it's really beautiful, the cover. In the UK, it feels like a crime book. In the US, it feels like a mystery more so. I don't know. I think it's probably just the last thing I think about when I'm writing a book. You know, when I sat down to write, you know, for the 4 years that I spent writing this book, I just didn't think about where it would sit on the shelf, and I didn't think about what I was writing, or, you know, would it be up for a dagger, or would it be up for a different award, or where are they going to put it in the library, and will Waterstones take it? You know, where will they put it? Will it be Thriller of the Month? Can we get that? Or will it be, you know, Book of the Month? Will it, you know, there's so many. If you go down that road, you will drive yourself mad. And I never would. Like, I just, all I care about is the story. I cared about Patch and Saint and Misty and Sammy, and I didn't care where it was put. I just had a story to tell, and I let everything kind of fall away in the background. And I'm doing that again now. I'm writing a new book at the moment, and everything disappears. You know, I forget what All the Colours of the Dark was and why it sold so many copies, and because otherwise you'll be destined to write the same sort of book again. Like, I have so many friends that had that huge debut, you know, where you sell 5 million copies and then they rush out a second book, and invariably it's not as good, and then you're playing catch up. And there is some, I can't remember who told me, but I think readers will forgive you 3 books or something like that. You know, if you write a brilliant book, you then get a pass for the next 2 books before people give up on you. And yeah, and like, well, before people lose confidence in the stories that you're writing. And I never want that to happen. So I'll spend 4 or 5 years writing a book that is the absolute best I can do, and I'll never compromise.
I think that's amazing, because you're not putting yourself in a box then, and you're just kind of letting yourself go, and letting the book go where it wants to go, like where your mind takes it. And I just think that's amazing then, because that's getting all your creativity out and not just subjecting yourself to, oh, I need to write in this genre, or I need to write this many pages. That's really interesting to hear.
Yeah, I think I'm lucky though, in that I have editors, UK and US editor, that just give me complete freedom. Like, the next book is an outright love story. There is no crime in it. You know, it's a complete detour. And at no point was there a discussion, you know, that we should follow up All the Colours of the Dark with a similar book. I just get complete freedom to write the book that I want. And I don't know if I'm just really lucky, you know, in that respect, because I know other authors that have signed like 4-book crime, you know, write a book a year, and that's tough. I think that's a tough way to write a book, but I'm lucky because I'm happy enough to go and work 3 other jobs for 4 years while I write the book that I love, and I don't really care what I'm doing because I care about the story so much.
That's amazing. It's lovely to hear how much like you care about your work and the impact that it has on the readers. Like, is there anything specifically that you wanted from All Colours of the Dark for readers to get from it, or like even if it was just a feeling or anything? Is there anything in particular?
I think probably that connection, you know, with Patch in particular. Like, Saint is the best character that I've ever written. You know, she is. I talk about her more so than I do about Patch or anyone else, because she was very difficult to write, and I get more messages about Saint than I do about any other character, and people worry that she doesn't get the ending she deserves, and people worry about her and really care about her, and I get that because I feel the same as well, you know, about her. But I think I wanted people to take away the fact that, I think, particularly in my life as well, I had a really crappy childhood, and I grew up thinking that I wouldn't end up where I'm supposed to be, you know, because my life had taken so many detours, and I veered so far from the path that I wanted to be on. I thought I won't end up anywhere good, and certainly won't end up, you know, being happy or doing something that makes me happy. So I wanted to rewrite that way of thinking, you know, particularly with Patch, because he is that kind of kid, you know, and Duchesses and We Begin at the End, they're the kind of kids, you know, where you have this difficult childhood, and you feel kind of written off, and you feel slightly like your future isn't yours to decide, because someone else has made these decisions for you, and someone else has dictated and kind of shaped your life, and you're never going to be able to get it back. And I wanted to dispel that notion, and Patch goes some way toward doing that. I think, you know, he is incredibly impulsive and is ruled by his heart, and really he lives this amazing life. You know, he wouldn't necessarily see it because he's so fixated on this task he's got, you know, this mission to find this girl, you know, and kind of save her life, that he misses everything that he sees. You know, we see it through his eye, you know, we see what he sees, and he sees the most beautiful, amazing things, and travels around the country and lives this rich, full life. And he, if you were to ask him if he would live a life like that as a kid, he would, you know, he would think you were mad.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I can definitely tell you succeeded with that. Like I told you at the start, since I read All the Colours of the Dark, I've not stopped thinking about those characters, especially Patch and Zane. Did you find that like a particular character, whether it was one of those two or in any of the other books, were particularly hard to write about? And like, yeah, what kind of is your writing process for like creating a character?
They've all been difficult. Like, it's a funny thing, because you know, I talked before about people selling, you know, 5 million books with their debut. Your debut invariably is not your best book, you know, or it shouldn't be. If you think about your job or anyone's job, you generally start at the bottom and you get better, you get more skilled, you earn more money, you're more competent. It should be the same in publishing. You know, publishing likes the shiny new thing, and you know, all the colors of the, I love Tall Oaks, my debut, but All the Colors of the Dark is a different level of storytelling. You know, I know that because there's no way I could have written this book 10 years ago. You know, I'm a better storyteller now than I was. Character wise, they've all been difficult. Duchess was incredibly difficult because I began writing her when I was 19, and that book was published when I was 39, I think. So
Wow.
it was a long lifetime journey with that character. And then Patch and Saint were equally hard because it was lockdown and I was writing, and it was difficult lockdown. You know, it was difficult to concentrate, and there was so much noise and everyone was having such a difficult time, and it was hard to shut it out. And I wrote Hatch and Saint, I wrote nothing but dialogue for the first year of writing the book. I wrote conversations between the two of them, and I was trying to work out who they were and trying to get them to form this relationship and get to know each other. And I kind of stripped it back to how we do that in real life. And I thought, how did I get to know my partner and my friends? And it's through conversation. You know, it always is. It's through questions and answers. And so I wrote a series of conversations between Patch and Saint, and eventually, you know, 6 months, 7 months, 8 months in, I began to figure out who they were. So by month 13, when I begin writing the story, you know, I can write Patch walking to school, and I know that if he hears a girl in trouble, I know what he'll do. You know, he'll rush straight in and get himself into even more trouble. And I knew that Saint without Patch is almost half formed. You know, she's like missing a limb. She will move heaven and earth to find him, even when the police can't. So I had this setup. I had a really strong setup for this story. I just didn't know where I was going, and I didn't know that 4 years later it would end up being a completely different book to the one I imagined it would be.
That's so interesting. And kind of along the lines of that, um, I was really interested because All the Colours of the Dark was the first book that I had read of yours, and then I was like, I need to read more of his work. So then I went on to begin at the end. Um, I honestly thought reading All the Colours of the Dark that you were from America. And then when I got to the end and read the, you know, acknowledgements and about the author, I saw that you were from the UK, and I was like, oh my goodness. So how did you write so well about America, and like, you know, just the dialogue between the characters being, you know, American and all of that? I'm just interested to know.
It didn't come easily. because sometimes it feels like learning another language slightly. Because I was writing, all of the books have been set in places that I've never been before. So on the surface, it seems twice as hard, to write the story. Whereas, I could set a book in London because I know London very well. I'm a Londoner. But America, so I always create the town. The towns are fictitious in all of the books, but I put them down somewhere real. And so with All the Colors of the Dark, I had this town, and I just for like a year and a half, I didn't have anywhere to put it down. I was just looking constantly. I was reading. I was working in the library, and I would spend like months and months just looking at maps and travel guides and non-fiction and photographs and old newspapers and things like that, and just immerse myself in that world. And I came across a photo of a place called Dogwood Canyon. It's a really beautiful picture, but it was a feeling like I've always been led by my kind of gut feeling, and I thought, this, at the very least, this has to be in the book. I don't know if this will be where the story was set, and I began to research it, and it's in Missouri, and I began to look at Missouri in the 70s, and geographically it was what I was looking for, because I was looking for kind of the Midwest. I was looking for a landlocked state because I wanted Patch to be this pirate that had never seen the ocean before. Because it was tragic, and kind of there's this, I knew there would be a beautiful moment coming later when he finally makes it to the ocean and he sees a boat for the first time, and I really could see that scene, so I knew that I needed it somewhere there. And then I was looking at what was in the news, because I knew the book would begin in the 70s, and it was Roe versus Wade, and I knew that abortion would be one of the themes in the book. And Roe versus Wade was, Missouri has a difficult history with abortion, and everything lined up. So I had my location, and then the painstaking research begins. I get totally obsessed with the detail. I work across 3 screens. You're currently on my middle screen, which is
you're on my middle screen too, but I've only got 2.
Yeah, so my middle screen will be the manuscript, the Word document that I'm writing, and then the left-hand screen will be photographs of the scene that I'm writing. So I will track down photos of Missouri in the 70s, whichever scene I'm writing. If I'm writing the town or the woods or something like that, I'll have photos covering that screen. On the right-hand screen will be a list of everything, every detail that is in that scene. I'll pick out what trees are growing, what do the plants smell like, what do the clouds look like. I will have every single detail. And then I overwrite a simple scene and I put in all the detail, and then I go back a day later and I begin to cut it, and I cut it again and again. And normally what I'm left with is a single paragraph from about 2 days' work, but it's a perfect paragraph that tells you exactly the right amount of detail to feel like you're there, with the character that you're in Missouri. And I do that for every scene in the book.
Wow. Then there's no surprise then that it takes you a couple of years, if you're going into that level of detail and that level of research to make your book, when there's that much going into it. And I was going to ask you about where you like to write, if there's anywhere in particular, but I guess with you wanting to have 3 screens, it's not like you can just write anywhere, I guess.
Only ever at my desk, which is a problem when you're on tour for a year and a half. Now, I can make notes on a laptop, I can make notes on my phone, but I can't write anything unless I have my exact setup and I'm really particular with it. And I need everything around me that I have when I've written the last few books. I need my desk and the exact same setup and the same paintings on the wall, and everything needs to be the same. And I drive myself slightly mad with it. But then when I shut the door, like now, I can sit down and start writing, and it's a completely immersive, escape. It totally feels like I'm stepping out of my life and into the story. And I couldn't do that if I was in a coffee shop or on an aeroplane.
Was that challenging then with you moving house? Did you feel like you had to kind of create the same office in a
Do you
way?
know what? I took photographs. I took detailed photographs of even the bookshelves, and then I got my eldest son to recreate it with me. It was kind of like building a set almost, and every detail is exactly the same.
That's so interesting. They do say though, like psychologically, don't they, that like um students struggle in exam conditions because they're not learning the same, like they're not in the same environment as in the classroom.
Yeah.
So I completely get what you mean there by you just want the same thing. I hope you've got a comfy office chair though, if you're in there quite a lot.
Do you know what? When I see other people and I speak to other authors and they're writing on laptops and they're on the train and stuff, I'm really in awe. Like I look at them and I think, how can you concentrate? It like blows my mind. Yeah, it would be. I've tried it many times because I think I would be a lot quicker. But it just, for one, like just the amount of space I need, like I need 3 screens because there's so much going on. I couldn't, like a laptop feels tiny. So as well as, the noise and the environment and things like that. But, it works for me.
I guess different things work for different people, don't they?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I wanted to ask, because I've not really read a book before that has had so many pages but really short chapters, which I absolutely loved, by the way, especially because it makes me feel like I'm like just getting through more chapters. It's I feel like an acknowledgement when I finished a chapter. And then because they were quite short, it felt like I was just doing well with the book. Was that like an intentional thing, or was it just you got to the end of the chapter so you finished it?
No, it was because I write out of order. So in year 2, after I've spent a year writing dialogue, year 2, I begin writing scenes that I want to write. So on any given day, I will sit down and write what I feel like writing. One day I might feel like writing prom, the kids getting ready for prom. The next day I could be one scene away from the final scene in the book, and then I'll jump back and forth like that. So I knew that I had these basement scenes to write, and they were really difficult for many reasons. But I remember it was a real problem in America because my US editor said you can't have these kids in the basement for a year, for 300 days. It's too long. It's going to, readers won't like it. You categorically can't do it. And I knew that I had to do it. I knew that in order for Patch and Grace to build this bond that is going to last a lifetime, literally a lifetime, it can't be done quickly. I also knew that none of it would be gratuitous. It wouldn't be like a torture porn type. These kids are in the basement having a terrible time. Most of the scenes with Grace, she steals the scene. She is very funny, and she takes Patch by the hand and leads him out of the dark mentally. So when I was writing, I was very aware that this would be potentially difficult for some people to read. I didn't want it to be too long. It was also really hard for me to write. So I would pick up with Patch and Grace in the basement, and I would write for an hour, and then I would move on and I would write Sammy or something that made me smile. And then I'd go back and do that again and again. And that went on for maybe 6 months. And then at the end of it, I had all of these very short pieces of writing. So when I began to rebuild in year 3, when I began to put the book back together like a jigsaw puzzle, I had short chapters, and I knew that it was going to be a long book. I knew that the book would span decades, and so it was going to be like 130,000 words. So then you have the question of how do you keep the pace up, and how do you keep people reading, and how do you not make it feel like a big book, like this big thing, this big like challenge that someone has to undertake. And it was short chapters. You can read, none of the chapters are more than 4 or 5 pages. Most of them are 1 or 2. You can sit down and read at bedtime, 1 more chapter. And it's going to take you a couple of minutes. And so that's a good way of keeping the pace going. And it really suits the story.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember thinking, All the Colors of the Dark is like really high on my TBR. I need to read it. And I host a chapter a day book club for chapter 25. And I was like, I wonder how many chapters it's got. Because we literally read 1 chapter a day on that book club. And then I looked and I was like, no. That would take,
Uh-huh.
a very long time. But it does, it just keeps you, it makes you think, okay, I can just read one chapter if you've not got a lot of time, but it also makes you want to keep reading because you feel like you've accomplished it. So
Yeah.
it worked perfectly for the writing of the book as well.
I've had so many messages about it, about the
We,
short.
the readers appreciate the short
Yeah, they
chapters.
really do. Yeah, I like a book with short chapters.
Definitely. So you talked a little bit about the title before, and I wanted to ask you a bit more about that. Like, kind of, how did the title come about, and did you have like any other titles that you were thinking about for the book?
So I had nothing at all for 4 years. I had nothing, no title. I didn't waste too much time on it because you can lose months like that. You know, you can drive yourself mad looking for a title. Generally, with my books, what happens is when I finish writing, we'll read back through it and pull out some ideas from the text. You know, that's how we begin at the end. Tall Oaks, you know, Wicked Girls, they were all named because things were pulled from the text and put together to make a title. Colors was different because everything we pulled out I hated. Every title suggestion I didn't like at all. Nothing fit the story. I didn't want something overtly crime. I didn't want it to feel too like it was trying too hard, you know, trying to be literary. Or it was a really, really difficult process. And I came up with almost no titles as well. I remember my editors asking me to send in lists and I had nothing. And then I was in New York and I was having lunch with my editor there, and my UK editor emailed over all the colours of the dark in massive letters, and I said it out loud at the table, and my US editor loved it, and that was the first time they had agreed on something that they both loved. And so I thought I should probably try and love it as well, and it took maybe 3 or 4 months of me staring at it every day, just looking at the words for me to think I quite like this title. And it really fits. It really fits the story, you know, because the story is about, you know, Grace Patches in this dark place, and kind of metaphorically as well. You know, he's in a really terrible place, and Grace comes along and brings all this light into his life, and he doesn't necessarily see that at first, but when he comes out, he is a boy with purpose. You know, he's a kid that would never have picked up a paintbrush had he not been through this trauma, and art kind of saves his life. You know, he goes on to become a wealthy, successful artist, and he is a kid that wouldn't have left the town he grew up in. You know, he would have stayed there, got a job, never really seen anything, and all of a sudden he travels around looking for Grace, but in turn seeing everything. You know, his world is wide open. All of this color, all of this light floods into his life. So it was a perfect title, which now, like 3-4 years later, I can admit finally they got it right.
That's so interesting because I feel like it drew me straight away because I was like, oh, what does this title mean? And then reading the book, it does just completely fit. So it's interesting that it took you a while to kind of think, oh yeah, I like this. And I know that says some authors that kind of have a title in their head and run with that. So hearing you say, actually, I couldn't quite think of what title would fit with it is really interesting. And did you say that it was like that for all your books? You just kind of name them at the end?
I've never successfully named one of my books. So if I've suggested a name, it's never one that we go with. But you know, there's also science behind titles. You know, like, and once the sales department get involved, and everyone has an opinion and looks at what works and what looks right on the shelf. And yeah, to me it's definitely a collaborative thing, the title, you know, whereas the story, for the most part, until I turn it over to my editors and we begin the edit, it feels like mine. You know, for the first 3 years, it's entirely my story. And then it becomes, you know, all of these incredibly talented people get involved and make it a million times better. And the title is kind of, you know, the feather in the cap, you know, at the very end. But it's really hard to title a book. You know, like, I think of some of my favorite titles of recent years, like I love Wild Dark Shore by Charlotte McConaughey. You know, it's a great title, but how do you come up with a title like that? It's incredibly difficult. Do you remember a book called Burnt Paper Sky? years
Yeah,
ago. Yeah, it was a
definitely watch
great.
that one.
It's a great title. It was called something else, something like much more normal in America. In the UK, it was Burnt Paper Sky and things like that. You know, a title that stops you in your tracks. I
Yeah, I
like.
want to read that now.
Yeah, yeah. I can't remember what it's about, but I remember the title.
Mm,
Titles that stick in your mind, like I love Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow. I know it's not an original title, but I love the book so much, and I love the title, and I love looking at it on the shelf. You know, there's
it's an
just
incredible book.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think sometimes as readers we don't really understand or kind of remember that there's a lot of people that kind of collaborate on a book. Like once the author has, turned over the first draft, second draft, final draft, all of that. So it's really interesting to hear you talk about that. And it's why I always love reading the acknowledgements. And
Mhm.
I reread the acknowledgements for All the Colours of the Dark before we got on the call today, and it I just like when I reread it, I noticed a bit about Disney and Mickey Mouse, and it just really made me laugh.
Yeah, and that is true. They are really difficult to negotiate with.
I can imagine.
Mhm.
It's just lovely, kind of like seeing an author like just bring attention to everyone else who works on it. So and your acknowledgements were really in depth as well. So it was just
Yeah, it's the only time that I get to be on the page, you know, as me, kind of, you
yeah.
know, the story is entirely someone else, you know, and you're following these characters, you know, I might have created them, but they feel like real people to me. And I hope they do too, to everyone that reads the book. But the acknowledgements, I get a few pages to shine a light on, you know, the most talented team. You know, they are so talented, the people that make, you know, it's hard to sell a lot of books. And, you know, when it happens, it is the work of like 50 amazing people, you know, from editors to marketing and PR and booksellers and book bloggers and book clubs. You know, there's so many facets involved in a bestseller.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's amazing to hear about all of that. Um, so we talked a little bit earlier about with you being on tour and that you've seen lots of different people, and you're a New York Times bestseller. You've seen lots of success from your book, and not just All the Colors of the Dark. And I saw that picture of First Lady Jill Biden reading it on the beach, and I was like, that must be so surreal. Like, how does it feel to see all the success of your book?
It's, you know what, I don't feel it until I look back at it afterwards. So sometimes it's such a blur. I go onto my own Instagram to look at the photos, you know, to remember what I've done over the past year. But the Jill Biden thing was mad because I think the first person that flagged it was, there's an author called Mike Craven, and his wife saw it on Sky News. This picture, because she thought she recognized the book, took a screenshot, sent it to Mike sent it to me. I zoomed in, couldn't quite make it out, and then everyone started sending it to me, and that was it was a really a pinch me moment. And then I met George Bush I was in Kennebunkport. I was doing a thing there, which is like where the Bushes have their summer house. And I went to this drinks thing in one of the houses, because there's like a few different houses behind these gates and there's Secret Service everywhere. And I didn't think he would be there, because we were told he probably won't be there, and then he just turned up next beside me, and we started talking, and he said, "Do you want to come and see my paintings?" In the house, and then I walked over and I was thinking, this is the president, you know, this guy was the president, and it was a reminder of how far storytelling can take you, you know. And then I found out that Bill Clinton had read We Begin at the End, and they're just like, yeah, for someone like me with my background and my education, it feels like a lot, a lot. It feels like a lot in the nicest possible way, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, these are things that I will remember forever, and yeah, very special.
Yeah, amazing. And with all the authors obviously giving their takes on the book as well. Like, just I've got my copy of All the Colors of the Dark, which I love this cover, by the way.
Yeah.
I think it's incredible.
Yeah.
But like, yeah, just seeing like Bonnie Garmus on there, Richard Osman, and all of these authors, like after they've read your book, giving those bits to put on the cover, I bet that just feels incredible as well.
It does, because it's really hard to get. I know, because blurbing, like, you get sent so many books. You know, I have started saying no to everything because I'm having a year off. But it, like, someone like Richard Osman will be sent and offered every book, every single book. So I listen to his podcast with Marina. You know, The Rest is Entertainment. It's the only podcast I listen to, and I first heard him mention it on there, and it was really cool. And I think it's a reminder just of how generous people can be. Patricia Cornwell emails me all the time, and we, you know, have this lovely friendship. And she is someone that has been hugely successful for decades. And, you know, she takes the time out to be kind, you know, and check in on me, because she knows how hard it is to tour and to go on, you know, and travel around the world. And it takes a toll after a while, because I talk about really personal things generally to do with the book. And that takes a toll, and she just checks in. And it's nice, just, you know, this is someone that I've only met a couple of times. And I just, yeah, I'm just always blown away by how kind people are, you know, how they take the time out to read the book and say something nice about it. And yeah, it's really nice.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess it kind of links back to what you said earlier about the book community just being some of the kindest and nicest people out there. It's lovely to be a part of.
Mhm.
Is there like any authors that, like, well, when you get time to read, like, who are your favorite like go-to authors or books that you'd recommend to us? We're always
Just,
having to our GBRs.
I've just started reading the new Claire Dabley book. She wrote
Mhm.
Talking at Night. Did you read that? I
Yeah,
love that
a
book.
lot of our clubs have read Talking at Night. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that book so much. It's such a perfect story. So I've been very impatiently waiting for a new book, and it's just arrived, and I'm about to get into that. What have I read that I loved? A Prayer for Owen Meany is one that I recommend all the time, by John Irving. It's the only John Irving book I've ever read. But I do this thing, so when I go on tour, when I'm doing the signing afterwards, I always ask a few different people to recommend books, and I make a note of all of them. And if the same book pops up a few times, then I'll try and read it. And John Irving, you know, that book is one of the best books I've ever read in my whole life, and I wouldn't have found it had, you know, a dozen Americans not recommended it to me. But it's such a good book. I was about to start A Little Life, because I still haven't read it, and then I had to put it down again because I had to read a few other things because I was doing some interview stuff. And so I will go back to that one, but everyone keeps warning me about it. I could get a warning that it's, you know, this book's going to ruin you and destroy you, and I'm not sure I
I've
want to
not
be.
read it yet either, and everyone keeps saying that, and I'm like, stop.
Yeah, it's because it's not only is it big, but I know that the subject matter is heavy,
Mm,
and it's a commitment, isn't it? It's going
absolutely.
into it as a commitment, and yeah, I need to clear my schedule slightly so I can make time for it. But I'm
You
looking
want to
forward.
appreciate it and not feel like you're rushing it or
Yeah,
anything.
because there's so much hype, and it's also quite divisive, that book. You know,
Mm.
as many people have told me not to read it as have told me that it's their favorite book of all time, which I find fascinating and I kind of love. So yeah, I need to give it its time. How about you?
Oh, so I have recently, because we've got the lovely Claire Douglas coming next week, for a Q&A, and I recently read The Couple at Number 9 by her, and that was just
Yeah.
an absolutely incredible book. And also talking about Bonnie Garmus, I'm currently about halfway through Lessons in Chemistry,
Yeah.
which has honestly been on my TBR for way too long. But I have finally picked it up and I'm absolutely loving it, and don't know why I put it off for so long. It's one of those, isn't it? Like, there's just some books that kind of stay there for a while,
There is
um,
a
and
special one.
just need to pick it up.
Yeah, if you get the chance to have her on as well, you should totally do it, because she is one of the most interesting people. She's so good to listen to. Yeah.
Amazing. We'll have to reach out to her if we've not already. Definitely. I want to ask you kind of like what, well, we say it's a controversial question.
I'm
Do you
interested.
prefer reading hardback or paperback?
Hardback. I love a hard.
Really?
Yeah,
Oh, I'm the opposite.
yeah, I know. Well, yeah, it's not practical at all, but I love anything kind of beautiful. I love, and I think hardbacks are beautiful, and I like to take the dust jacket off, and yeah, I like it when there's something underneath, and yeah, hardback. I like the feeling of it.
That's fair enough. I just like it being lighter. Maybe
Yeah,
I'm just lazy.
no, I get it.
And do you prefer like reading a physical book or like an ebook or audiobook? What's or do you mix it up sometimes?
I'm very late to the audiobook party. I don't ebook if I'm traveling because I can load the Kindle up with like 20 books and it's very practical. And but there is no substitute for for the real book for
Mhm.
holding it. And if I've got the ebook and I love it, I'll often buy the book just for my bookshelf. But audiobooks, that it's kind of caught me out because the audiobook of All the Colours of the Dark has sold as well as the hardback and ebook. They're almost exactly in sync with each other, which shows how big audio is getting. It's in the last year, the last 2 years, it is a huge kind of force. And we have an amazing narrator called Eduardo Ballerini, who was in The Sopranos. And I was in New Jersey doing an event, and he came because he lives near there, and I got to meet him, and it was he's someone that people love his reading so much that they will buy any book that he narrates because he has such a following, and it doesn't matter what the story is, they just want to hear him. And meeting him, I understood he has a real kind of presence, and yeah, he's very talented. It's a difficult thing. I know some authors that narrate their own books and I'm like, Jesus, I can't think of anything worse.
It's voice actors in general, and yeah, the audiobook narrators are so talented.
Yeah,
And I feel like it can either really add to the story or completely take away from it.
yeah.
So it's amazing that you've got a good one.
I did, yeah. So what happens is normally when you finish writing the book, they'll send you. So they sent me like 10 actors reading the same passage from the book. And then I got to choose who I most thought matched the voice in my head when I was writing it. And Eduardo was like incredible, it was very similar to how I heard Patch Insane and the narrative. So easy decision.
That's so interesting. I didn't realize that they did that.
Yeah.
Wow, the more that you know. So All the Colours of the Dark especially has absolutely amazing reviews out there. And I was reading through some of like my friends' reviews on Goodreads today, and like everyone is rating it so highly. Do you ever read ratings and reviews, or do you try and stay away from them?
So I normally, so the first couple of thousand I will check in because I think you can't hide from your Goodreads average. Like it's such a good barometer. So when they're giving away prizes and things like that, I just think you don't, the easiest way to judge something, go on Goodreads because the average doesn't lie. I know that my best book has the highest average, and I know it's my best book, and I know that my least favorite of my books, or the one I've struggled with, has the worst average because the readers are right. So for the first couple of thousand I will check in and keep a rough, because you want to know if you've written the right story. You want to know if people are connecting to it. You need that barometer to tell you, because up until that point, it's just you and your team and your agents and editors and publicists and people like that have read the story. And everyone is so close to the book, sometimes you need to step away. And you do that when it goes onto Goodreads. And so I check in for the first couple of thousand, and then I completely stop. Unless someone tags me in a review, I won't read it, because I just think in that way madness lies. You can drive yourself insane looking at your Amazon chart position, and you can't do anything about it. The book is written. It's funny with colors because I knew that it was the best book that I could write. You know, I knew that it was the absolute best I could do as a storyteller. And I toyed with the idea afterwards, like I always do, of just stopping, you know, and I don't want to write anymore because it's too difficult, you know, and I find it too difficult. And if the storytelling, if it's not going well, then I let it bleed over into my personal life. And I know that I'm not as good a dad, I'm definitely not as good a partner. I'm not quite present because my mind is somewhere else. If I've had a bad day's writing, I'll be quieter. And I thought, is it worth it? You know, is this process worth it? And it absolutely is. You know, like I get over it very quickly because it's the only thing I know how to do. You know, it's the only thing that makes me feel better. If I'm stressed, it makes me feel grounded. I feel like a better person when I'm writing. And you know, obviously I fall in love straight away with a new set of characters, and then begin the process all over again.
Yeah. Was there a moment in your life where you were like, this is what I want to do, I want to be a writer, or did it just kind of come about?
So it came about because I was mugged and stabbed when I was a teenager, and you know, it was such a strange way into writing. You know, it was like, because I left school with no qualifications, and certainly didn't go to a school or come from a background where you became a writer. You know, no one I knew did anything like this. It wasn't it wasn't really an option. You know, my school was, I went to a rough school in London, and just, I was out when I was 19 and I was mugged and got into a fight. I used to get into a lot of fights, and so I fought the guy back who was trying to take my phone, and he pulled out a knife and stabbed me repeatedly, and it was after that that I kind of unraveled. You know, like I was 19, but I was drinking a lot, taking a lot of drugs, and I think it was PTSD. You know, looking back at it, you know, I didn't know how to cope with what had happened to me, and so I borrowed a book from the library on writing as therapy, and you followed all these rules and you wrote about the trauma, and so that's how I became a writer. But yeah, by way of, like, after that I went and worked in the city for 10 years, hated it, and kept up writing in my spare time. And then I was nearly 30 and kind of had the life that I thought that I would never have. You know, I had a nice house and a nice car, and and a wife and a kid, and you know, I was the picture of content, but except I wasn't. You know, inside I was miserable and really struggling again mentally. And so I went back to writing because it had always been the thing that I turned to when I had a hard time in life, and then I began writing, and I haven't really stopped since then.
That is incredible. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Yeah.
It's really interesting to hear how, like, just any sort of creativity can really just get you through a really horrid time. And you know, if you've gone through something that's, you know, that's absolutely horrific, but then look what's come out of it. You've written absolutely amazing books that are bestsellers and got lots of readers that want to read all your work.
You know,
So
it was one of my many sliding doors moments. You know, I could have gotten up and not walked down that street on that day, and if that hadn't happened, I wouldn't have been stabbed. If I hadn't been stabbed, I wouldn't have picked up a book on writing as therapy. I wouldn't have been able to write characters like Patch and Saint and Duchess, because I'm able to empathize with them because I went through similar things when I was a kid. And you know, it's funny how the world works, how life works like that, you know. And then I end up sitting here talking to you about a book that has completely changed my life.
yeah, absolutely, and changed a lot of your readers' lives as well, completely, mine included. It is crazy, isn't it? I just wanted to ask you a bit more about what's coming next. I know you said that you are writing a book. Obviously, I'm guessing we're not expecting to see that quite just yet. You've just come back from tour. But is there anything that you can tell us about what's coming in the future?
At the moment, it's called The Timekeeper, and we'll see if that title sticks. But it looks at those sliding doors moments, and it looks at the idea of time and fate and how much control we have over the things that happen to us, you know, and how much our destiny is in our own hands. And it feels like one of my books, but it's definitely more of a love story. And yeah, I've been writing it for a few years, so I think probably 2027, maybe 28, it will be out. Mm-hmm.
Exciting. That sounds so interesting. And yeah, interesting that you've got a title for this one, quite, not at the end of the writing period, but yeah, we'll see if it stays.
Well, this title fits really well, the story. And so I keep thinking if I keep mentioning it for years in interviews, they'll have to call it the time because otherwise no one will know what it is. So yeah, it's tactical.
Well, there you go. You've said it now.
Exactly.
Amazing. Right, I'm just going to see what questions we have got in our Q&A function. Lovely. Okay, so Candice has got a couple of questions for you. So she said, Chris, I loved All the Colours of the Dark, thank you. My first one of yours, and I will be discovering the others. I have two questions, if that's okay. So the first one is, did one of the tour stops stand out for you as a particularly enjoyable one?
So the first stop that I did was Aspen in Colorado, and I'd only heard of Aspen because of Dumb and Dumber. It's the ski town that they go to in that film. It's like stunningly beautiful and horribly expensive, and was my first US event that I'd ever done, and so that was really special. And then we managed to end, so I've done, I can't remember how, like 8 or 9 US tours, and we managed to end one of the last ones in Vegas, which was really cool. So I'd never been to Vegas, and and so I loved Vegas, and I loved Sydney. It was amazing. I went to Iceland in you should go to Iceland Noir. It's so fun. It's yeah, it's stunning. It's there every November, and yeah, beautiful. But there's a million that I'm forgetting. I really love Charleston, South Carolina. Massive. Oh, it's so beautiful. Yeah, I've been lucky, but I think I've done 28 states now in a year and a half in America. So
oh my
goodness. I get asked to do teaching and things a lot, and I never feel quite qualified to do it because I'm still learning myself. But I've agreed to teach a creative writing course in Hawaii, just because I really want to go to Hawaii. And obviously, it will be amazing to do it. But Hawaii's been on my bucket list since I was a kid, so I will do Hawaii.
Amazing. What a way to kind of, tick off different travel destinations.
Yeah.
Amazing. So she was asked a little bit about what inspired the story, but we've talked about that a little bit. But she has also asked, did anyone inspire Saint? She's so awesome, and I really felt for her.
I wish. Saint is the character that I think I wrote, the character that I needed when I was a kid. I could have done with a saint in my life, and I think most people would do well to have a saint in their life. And if you're lucky enough to have found yours, hang on to them, because she is innately good and kind, and life is better with her in it.
Absolutely. She's such an amazing character, and one that I don't think will leave any of our brains for a long time. So Sam has said, hi Chris, I finished All the Colours of the Dark yesterday. I think it's going to be a book that stays with me for a very long time. My question is there a moment in any of your books that surprised you emotionally as you were writing it?
Thank you, Sam. I think probably the ending of All the Colours of the Dark, and the ending of We Begin at the End. Like, I know how the books will end when I begin writing. It's one of I never have a plan. I don't do any plotting or anything like that. I just write. And so I know where I'm heading. But when I get there, I'm still amazed that I've got there, because I'll leave the final chapter until the very end. It's one of the only things I write in order. And I won't spoil the ending. Will everyone have read the book or not? Not necessarily.
Not necessarily, but I think definitely most.
Okay, so I won't ruin the end, but I was heading towards the end of the book, and I knew where Patch and Saint would end up at the end of the story. I just didn't know. I didn't have a location for it, and so I put in a placeholder location, and we got to the end, and I knew the story wasn't finished, but we were going to print in about a week or something like that, and I was like, seriously contemplating stopping it, you know, because the book wasn't finished. I didn't have the location, and if you read the story, you know that the story can only end in this place. You know, it's the only place on earth where this story could possibly end, and I hadn't found it yet. So I was looking at my contract and Googling and trying to find out how much trouble I would be in if I stopped them publishing the book. I remember doing that. And then I just so happened to read a travel article, and someone had been traveling and he'd seen this bumper sticker on someone's car, and it said OBX, and there was a picture of a pirate. And then I went down this rabbit hole of looking into Blackbeard, and you know, and then I found this place, and I put it into the story, and the story was finished, and we had days to go until print, and it was the first time I knew that the story was done, and I had done everything I could. And so it was surprising and emotional, and I look back at it now and I think if I hadn't read that article, I wouldn't have finished this story. It would be a different book. So it was another one of those moments.
Absolutely. I was just thinking that there's just so many of those moments in life,
Yeah.
isn't there? And it's funny that you mentioned that today, actually, because I was thinking about it over the past couple of days. I don't know if it's because it's my birthday next week, so I just have been getting a bit existential. So I think that's probably why I just keep thinking, oh my gosh, this didn't happen, then this wouldn't have happened. And yeah, it's just incredible, isn't it? And yeah, that's kind of shaped the whole ending, which is such an amazing ending. And I actually like that last, I don't know what it is about that last line. Again, I won't say what it is, but it sticks in my head.
I know.
Really
I get a lot of messages about the last line.
yeah,
I get it.
it's a very strong last line.
It's one of the hardest things, isn't it? I mean, how many books have you read where you love everything about it, and then the ending, it falls apart? You know, it's a thing that happens a lot in crime books, because generally, you know, it's so hard to set up a twist, you know, and you're reading it and you think, how are they going to do this? How are they going to land the plane? And then there's a big plane crash and it can't be done because the setup is too outlandish or too difficult to pull off. And I think that that's why it's so difficult to write crime. I know a lot of people are kind of snobby about the genre, but it's such a difficult thing to do, because you have to, you know, you have all these threads and you've got to try and weave them all together in a way that is satisfying for the reader. And you've got, you know, most crime books live or die on the twist, and you have readers that will try and guess the twist from the very beginning. And, you know, because that's part of the fun of reading a crime book. So it's incredibly difficult to do.
Yeah, absolutely. I am definitely one of those readers that tries to predict everything, to the point where I stopped reading crime books for a while because I was like, I'm ruining this for myself. But then I've just fallen back in love with them again. They'll feel like they'll always be my favorite. So Becca has said, "Hi Chris, absolutely adored All the Colours of the Dark. The third book of yours I have read. Being English, why did you decide to set all your books in America? Is there a personal connection, and how much research do you do on the towns and people your stories are going to focus on?"
So endless research, like we discussed before. But why America? Because so after I was stabbed and I got the book on writing as therapy, there were these rules that you had to follow. You had to write about the thing that happened. So I had to write about the stabbing, but you had to change the people involved to fictional characters. You had to change the ending to something you could control, and you had to change the location to the last place you were happy. So me as a 19-year-old, I looked back at my life, my kind of short life, for the last time I was happy. And my parents split up when I was quite young, and my dad, I'm really close with my dad, but he wasn't around as much. And he came back and took me and my brother to Disney World. So America became my happy place. You know, like if I wanted to sit down and write a story, my life in London was kind of falling apart. But mentally, I could travel 4,000 miles to the US and to my happier place. And still now, you know, 20 years later, I still do it. When I sit down to write a story, I mentally travel and I leave London behind, and I leave everything in my life behind, and completely escape into another world. And that world is America.
Wow, that's so interesting. Thank you. So Beth has asked, what type of books do you like to read? What's your number one book, brackets, not one of yours, that you recommend to people? What a difficult question.
of recent years, Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow is one that I recommend probably more than any other. My dad is a massive reader, and we're like in a book club of two, because he will read 5 books for every one of mine, because he's retired and has more time. But I remember trying to pitch him Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow, and I made the fatal mistake of saying it's set in the world of video games. And he said, there's no way I'm reading it. And then I eventually convinced him to read it, and it's one of his favorites as well, because it's just so beautiful, isn't it? It's there's something so fascinating about friendship, and it's a really special one. I grew up reading Stephen King books when I was a kid. I read loads of John Grisham books. I stopped reading. I met John Grisham not that long ago, and I'd stopped reading John Grisham for a while, and then I read one because they sent me one to blurb recently, and I read it, and I'd forgotten just how brilliant he is. Just you can start reading it, and then all of a sudden you're 150 pages in, and that is a really skilled storyteller, that does that. And so I like a legal thriller sometimes. Talking at Night, we mentioned Claire Dabley, and the John Irving I mentioned as well. They're my kind of go-to recommendations. I read The Road by Cormac McCarthy as well. Every few years I've read it about 5 or 6 times, and you notice different things in it every time you pick it up. And I love that about books as well, when a book reads differently depending on where you are in your life. And
yeah, absolutely. I still need to reread Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow. A sliding doors moment with that one for me. I stopped reading for ages. I read a lot as a teenager, and then I saw Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow, and you know how the cover has the Great Wave on it?
Mhm.
It's one of my favorite pieces of art, and I was like, I've not read a book in a while. I'll pick it up. And then here I am a few years later, back into reading.
Yeah.
As part of book club. So that is literally one of those moments.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So Joanne has asked, writing out of order has blown my mind. Have you ever accidentally written a section of the book twice because you've forgotten you've already completed that section?
So many times. But what happens is I will fall in love with the new version of it, and then the old version is gone, and gets deleted. And I will, all the time, I'll write 10,000 words, 20,000 words in the wrong direction, and I'll turn back again, and I will, and I'll burn loads of chapters. And I think I wrote close to 500,000 words for All the Colours of the Dark, and the final draft is 127,000. So,
oh my gosh,
there's a lot of. I used to see it as waste, but now it feels every word feels necessary.
Mm-hmm.
Everything has been cut for a reason. Every sentence has stayed in for a reason.
Yeah, absolutely. It's what's got you to that final product, I guess. Yeah. So Caroline has said, hi, Chris, a few questions for you. So I'll break them down. How old were you when you knew you wanted to be a writer? I know we've discussed that a little bit, but...
When I properly knew, I was 30. And I've been working in the city for 10 years, and I said, I was successful and doing okay, and I was nearly 30, and then just by chance I read a book called The Last Child by an author called John Hart, and it's a really beautiful missing child thriller. I highly recommend reading it. And I got obsessed with the book, and then I read an interview with John Hart online that I found, and he talked about how he was a successful lawyer, and one day he just quit his job because writing was the thing that made him happy. And the next day I remember I was offered a promotion at work, and it was like lots of money and kind of a certain future, and I quit my job because John Hart quit his job. And I came home and I told my now ex-wife what I had done, and I said, I've quit my job. We're going to have to sell our house and sell our car, because she was a student. We had no money coming in, and we had a kid as well, and that's exactly what we did. I quit my job, I sold my house, sold my car, and I began the next 10 years of my life being completely broke and working 4 jobs and not sleeping, missing my kid and missing everything. I miss my kids, all of this Christmas plays, sports days, things like that. I just worked because we had no money at all. I couldn't get a mortgage, so we were stuck renting, and there was no guarantee that it would have worked. I just knew that I needed it. I really needed it. So that's when I realized that I wanted to be a storyteller. And I look back at it now and I think, firstly, I can't believe I did it, you know, and it feels really selfish, and it used to make me feel bad about myself. And then I did an event with Nita Prose, the author.
Mhm.
She said, she reframed it, and she said, if you're on an aeroplane, the plane's going down, the oxygen mask drop, you're with your kids, what do you do first? You put on your own mask so you can help your family. And so me quitting my city job was me putting on an oxygen mask and helping my family. And that's the way I think of it now. And also there was no guarantees that it ever would have worked out, but even in the 10 years when I was working 4 jobs, I was happier than the previous 30 of my life. So I knew that I had found the thing that I was supposed to do. I just had all this guilt because I thought, you know, if I'd stayed in the city, we would have probably been wealthy and my kids would have had a different life. And yeah, so it's one of those things, isn't it? Nothing comes easily, but I knew that I wanted to do it. I needed to do it, is the right way of putting that.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you need to, then you've got to go for it. And
I think so.
you know, everything that has led to it's
Yeah,
things for you.
yeah. Like my eldest son is 15 at the moment, and he is beginning to think about what next. And the only advice I can ever give is, you know, find something that makes you happy, because nothing else really matters. You know, you can't choose a job, a career path, a life for any other reason than because it makes you happy, because otherwise you won't be.
Yeah, 100%. I've already asked the other questions from Caroline, so I will move on to Alyssa, who has asked, what can you tell us about the film adaptation that is in the works for All the Colours in the Dark? Is it to be a film for streaming, cinematic release, or a miniseries? Has casting started? So lots of little questions.
Excitingly, we're much further along now, and it's likely to be 3 seasons of TV. So a lot of television from one book. Yeah. And there is likely to be 2 actors cast for Patch and for Saint. So we have adult and child. And yeah, it's incredibly exciting. And hopefully soon I'll be able to talk about exactly what's going on. But I've read episode 1 and 2, and yeah, it's good. It's good.
How exciting. Are you nervous about it at the same time? Or?
Do you know what? I'm not, because for one, I know that we have the most talented team working on it. And 2, my version already exists. You know, it's out there and it will always be mine. You know, it will always be the book. The book came first, and I love the people adapting it, but I know it will exist on its own. You know, it will be its own thing. From what I've read, it's faithful but also original, and that's, I think, the best that you can ask for. And it will bring lots of new readers and viewers and people into the world that I kind of dreamed of for Patch and Saint. And it's an important story with an important message, so it can only be a good thing.
Yeah, 100%. Do you get to kind of take any like creative direction with that, or do you kind of just want to leave it all to?
I change bits and pieces, they ignore it, and then then we all go our separate ways. That's generally what happens. But yeah, I do. Yeah, I work closely with them, and I love the writer, and I give notes, and yeah, I'm as involved as I can be, because I love these characters, I love this story, and I want everyone else to as well.
It's amazing. I guess that's actually quite reassuring to hear as a reader as well, because I feel like sometimes adaptations don't quite go how readers expect, but I guess also it is to, like you said, to kind of open the story and the characters to other people who may not necessarily read books. Like my partner, for example, just doesn't read at all, but I get to introduce him to my world of what I like through these adaptations.
Yeah.
So
Well,
It's
it's the same.
interesting.
My kids, I remember saying to them, "Do you want to read my book or listen to the audiobook?" And they just said they'll wait for the TV series. But they kind of will, like, because my 12-year-old, he can't read All the Colors of the Dark. It's too challenging for him. And my eldest is dyslexic, so does a lot of audiobooks and loves them. And so I've given him All the Colors of the Dark, the audiobook, and I know that he will listen to it. But there is something about seeing it, isn't there? And I'm the biggest fan of books in the world, but I'm very excited when something gets, when I see something on Netflix and I've read the book, I want to see it again. I want to see what someone's vision for it was. And often it's disappointing. It always is, isn't it? Because nothing can compare to the book, because the book, you get to create your own world as a reader. You get to pick the patch and say, and you get to see these scenes in your mind, and then someone goes and creates it for you, and it's different.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, it's super exciting. I'm very much looking forward to it. So Alyssa has also said, not a question, just a comment. I love the OBX sticker inspiration. I drive around the UK with an OBX sticker on my car, as it's one of my favorite places in the world. My family lives in North Carolina, so we go to OBX every few years for holiday.
Wow, it's so cool. I've still not been there. I've been really near. I will try and make my way there at some point. But yeah, it looks stunning in the photos.
I know, I always think I need to go traveling more, especially when I read books set in different locations. I'm like, I want to go to all of these places. The world's just, yeah, it's big and it's small at the same time.
Yeah.
Amazing. So Sophie has asked, hello, Chris. It's been wonderful to listen to you. I absolutely adored All the Colors of the Dark. It was my top read of 2025. It's all I talk about.
Thank you, Sophie.
So sweet. I've recently started a creative writing course. Is there any advice you would give to someone trying to find their writing voice and style? And how did you find yours?
I am the worst person to give advice. So that, like, twice in my life, I've done creative writing courses and been like a guest lecturer, and both of those times I've seen the teacher at the back like flinching and grimacing at the things that I'm teaching, because it's not the right way to write a book. But there is, in my experience, no right way. You can certainly, I toy with the idea of going back and doing a creative writing course, because I know that there's loads that I could learn. I'm further down that line in my career, but there's loads that I could learn. I would say don't start at the beginning. I'd say that there's so much pressure on the first chapter, on the first sentence, to hook the reader, pull them in. You can lose so much time. Jump straight into a scene that you've been really looking forward to writing, and then go back, and then go forward, and then go back again. And and if you're not enjoying it, you can't always enjoy it. I don't always enjoy writing, for sure, but if you're not enjoying it more than you're enjoying it, I would say that something is not quite right, and you need to make some adjustments, and maybe look at at what you're writing, or where you're headed, maybe. And because I think that's really important. Although I don't do any planning or anything, I know what I want for my characters. I think that's important, and I really believe it's important that you love the characters that you're writing as well. I know lots of authors don't agree with that, but if I don't love Patch and Saint, I can't expect anyone else to. And I don't want to spend, like, I'm going to spend 4 years with these characters. I don't want to spend 4 years with characters that I don't particularly like. So, write people that you want to be around, that you want to find, that you find interesting, and that you want the best for. That's what I would say.
You say that you're the worst person to give advice, but that was amazing advice. I think that was brilliant. And with all the writing stuff that we discussed earlier as well, I think that's all super helpful stuff to take on board. Amazing. I think that was a really lovely question to end on. So thank you so much to all the members who have come along today. It's been really lovely to have you. And don't forget that we do have a bonus chapter event to discuss All the Colours of the Dark again on the 2nd of February. So that would be great to see you guys there. And Chris, thank you so much for spending so much time with us this evening. It's been Absolutely amazing, and you know, I've kind of just been fangirling here for an hour and a half.
They were
It's
great
just been
questions.
really
Very
lovely.
much. Thank you all for coming, and I hope you'll read the next book as well.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And yeah, best of luck for, you know, all your future endeavors, and you know, we'll be there to support you with them.
Thank you very much. Thanks a lot. See ya.
Thank you so much. Bye bye.